I know what you're thinking. Just another guy hating on another exercise for whatever reason, for clicks, for likes, for the algorithm. I'm not hating on the deadlift, all right? I don't mind the deadlift. I have programmed the deadlift many times for specific situations, but I typically don't program the deadlift for these 4 main reasons. And if you want to see some of the programs that I do, you can check out the Sweet Science Fighting Training app, or you can just get the free MMA and Jiu-Jitsu strength conditioning blueprints. They are down in the description. But here's why I don't program the conventional deadlift with my athletes, whether it's combat, whether it's rugby, whether it's whatever. There's typically a reason why I don't do it. And let's start with these. The first one, you're typically choosing one heavy lower body lift in the training week. Typically, okay, this is not a hard and fast rule, but if you say you're training 2 full body sessions a week, I'm not gonna pick 2 lifts that are relatively similar. And when I say relatively similar, I mean when you say picking between a squat and a deadlift. A deadlift to me is almost like a pseudo squat. It's classed as a hinge, but it's not a true hinge. I'm gonna get to that in a second. If I'm gonna choose a heavy lower body exercise, I'm gonna choose the squat over the deadlift, and I've got more reasons why. But it means that if I'm squatting heavy, I'm not also gonna deadlift heavy in the same week. Now, you can do this. It is possible to be able to squat and deadlift in the same week, but typically if I'm trying to fit in other things as well, I'm just looking to do that one thing, and that will be squatting. To get to point number 2, which I just mentioned, I segued into it quite well, but it may be a little too early. The deadlift is not a true hip hinge. And if we talk about just general movement patterns, you're typically looking at squatting, hinging, lunging, pushing and pulling, and rotating you could add in there too. And you can even add in carries if you wanted to get into the extra categories. But for something to be a true hinge, it's gotta be at the hip. The deadlift involves too much knee bend for it to be a true hinge. And a true hinge will stretch the hamstrings and the glutes together, which means Romanian deadlifts, good mornings, and things of that nature are more of a true hip hinge because the knee doesn't move. Because when the knee moves, you're essentially shortening the hamstring at the knee and lengthening at the hip, and you're not getting any real true change in length of the hamstrings. Whereas if I'm doing, say, a stagger stance Romanian deadlift, good morning, or whatever it is, I'm getting true change or true lengthening in the hamstring because the knees are fixed. So I want to do a true hip hinge in my training program, and if I'm going to do a true hip hinge, I'm not also going to do a deadlift. It doesn't make much sense to be able to do Romanian deadlifts and conventional deadlifts in the same training program because you're just going to overload the lower back, the glutes, and the hamstrings. Which then segues me into point number 3. If you're doing weightlifting derivatives, there's no need to double up on similar movements. Now, the deadlift and Olympic weightlifting, say the clean deadlift, clean pull, whatever, or snatch pull, snatch deadlift, any of that, they're not the same movement. They're not even anywhere close to the same movement in terms of how they're taught. Often you'll see people talk about the hang position as a Romanian deadlift and then the position of the floor is like a deadlift. That's completely wrong. The weight distribution, where the body is completely different and the movement is completely different. But they tend to load similar muscles, and they're similar enough for me to say if I'm going to do a power clean or a clean pull, snatch, high pull, whatever, I'm not also going to do a conventional deadlift on top of that for the reasons I just mentioned before about now overloading similar muscle groups. So if I'm going to do, for example, a snatch high pull or a power clean, then I might move on to a squat after that to get my squat pattern in. And now to my 4th point, which is probably the most controversial point around the conventional deadlift. And that is, in my opinion, the risk of injury is just higher in the conventional deadlift than any other lift. And I'm gonna try counter some of the typical arguments around there. But it's usually more injury prone just because you don't have the eccentric phase to start to preload the muscles. So you have that tightness and that elastic energy to help you get through the lift. For example, if you're lowering the squat, you have that elastic energy to come down, you can rebound. Same thing with the bench press. You're lowering it down first and you're able to explode up. The deadlift, you're going straight from a dead stop, which in my opinion can be more risky for some athletes, especially athletes who potentially have some lower back issues. Now there's obviously, the pushback is everything's dangerous if it's not done properly, or if you do it too heavy, you can just do moderate loads and do it right. But then the argument comes down to, why am I going to do a deadlift or my maximum strength stimulus with low to moderate loads when I could just do a weightlifting derivative then and actually accelerate the bar? I'm going to get more out of my training by doing that than doing a 60 to 70% 1RM deadlift. Now you could change the conventional deadlift and do trap bar deadlifts. I quite like trap bar deadlifts, but again, now you get into the pseudo squat territory where you're basically doing heavy squats and trap bar deadlifts. Now, anecdotally, I will say that if you look at most professional sporting teams, they do not use the conventional deadlift. There are very few professional teams that use the deadlift as part of their training, a lot of it due to the reasons that I mentioned there. And it's something that I definitely picked up and was influenced by when I started my coaching journey in professional sport. But I will make a case for using the deadlift, and I have programmed the deadlift with athletes. Typically it's the trap bar deadlift, and it's for ones that can't squat. Well, let's not say can't squat. The ones that get a little too beat up from squatting, have some mileage on them, or squats just don't agree with them for whatever reason, I will make their main lower body lift the trap bar deadlift or some kind of deadlift variation. Their squatting variations will then be mainly single leg. Then that's a really good setup that you can use as well. If you're doing squat as your main lift, you can use hinging as accessory posterior work. Whereas if you're doing a deadlift as your main movement, you can use single leg squatting as your accessory squatting work or quad work. Those two, they pair really well when you do it like that, because then you're not doubling up on heavy loading for both. Now I know this video will be controversial. I know there'll be a lot of people that disagree, a lot of people that do their deadlifts every week and still train combat sports. That's perfectly fine. I'm not saying not to do the deadlift. What I'm stating are my reasons why I typically don't program the deadlift and why I like other movements over doing a heavy deadlift that make more sense in my programming structure. And if you want to see some weightlifting derivatives that you can do instead of the deadlift, check out one of these videos. I'll throw them up here and I'll run you through some of my favorite weightlifting derivatives that you can use in your training.